The big news for Georgia yesterday was that they landed brothers in the transfer portal, Zachariah and Zion Branch, one being a defensive back, the other being an offensive playmaker. And that is the headline here. Zachariah Branch. There's a lot that we know about this guy, and I'll do my best to tell you what I know about this guy, but what does it mean for Georgia? This is a huge get for the Dogs in the transfer portal, given the circumstances of what's been going on the last couple of years, specifically this past season. And now I think the addition of Zachariah Branch is a very, very positive one. And you think about with receivers. First of all, Georgia's lacking elite receivers in the first place. And now I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Zachariah Branch is an elite receiver. To me, that's not what I've seen quite yet in terms of watching him the last couple of years, but he has an opportunity to do that, and he, at the very minimum, has an opportunity to just make Georgia's offense better. But Georgia's lacking playmakers on the outside in the first place, and some of those guys are gone. Dominic Lovett, right, wide receiver from the last couple of years for Georgia, a former transfer himself, he's out of eligibility. He didn't get a COVID year, and he never redshirted. He's played 4 years. He's done. He's got to go. Arian Smith's got one more year eligibility. I don't think he's going to come back, better season than he's ever had statistically, and he was Georgia's primary weapon in terms of yards, not in terms of catches. He's played 5 years. He's likely going on to the NFL draft. Anthony Evans, young guy, just entered the transfer portal. He was a sophomore this past season. He was Georgia's primary return man, especially on punts. He dealt with injuries for a few weeks. We saw Malachi Starks take over that spot. So Georgia's losing guys, and they weren't performing up to the par you need from wide receivers on the outside of the ball in the SEC at the highest level of football, which is competing for national championships at Georgia. That's one of the highest levels of college football that you can get. So this is supposed to be an upgrade, right? It's supposed to be an upgrade. And let's talk about it. Ryan Keller from Dawg Post. Zachariah Branch is a dog, and I'm here to talk about it. In 2023, he was the consensus wide receiver 1 in that high school recruiting class. He was a consensus 5-star. He was a top 10 prospect when you look at the rankings, and that's a big deal. 5'10", he's under 200 pounds. I've been watching a lot of his clips over the last 24 hours. Here are a few things that I noticed. I noticed that he's twitchy. I noticed that he's got explosion. And I think he's more physical than maybe you would look at the height and weight, and you look at that on a depth chart. You look at that. I think that he's a little bit more physical than what he's listed at, which is a good thing, right? That's kind of one of those things you saw with the Lad McConkey. I'm not comparing him to Lad. We'll get into that, but it can't just be. That was one of the knocks on Arian Smith. Other than the drop passes, one of the knocks on Arian Smith that is the reason why he wasn't this elite receiver, because granted, they're similar in a way. They've got elite speed, some of the fastest players in college football, but Arian Smith was not this physical guy. He didn't have great hands, and at the end of the day, there were limitations with what he could accomplish for Georgia on that side of the football. To me, he's an upgrade from that standpoint in terms of just a playmaker and that speed and all that. Maybe not an upgrade in the speed, but an upgrade in you got a guy with that speed. I see him as a guy that could play in the slot. I see him as a gadget player for Georgia where they're trying to get him the ball in all sorts of ways. He is someone that has ran before and has taken handoff to the end zone, right? So between the 2 seasons, he had 11 handoffs. Now, you do wonder, hey, why is the production not there? It wasn't great production. And in 2023, he had Caleb Williams, who is one of the most electric, one of the most productive quarterbacks we've seen in college football recently, and a Heisman winner a couple years ago. So in 2023, when he had Caleb Williams, why did he only have 31 catches for 320 yards and 2 touchdowns is my question. I think that would require you, obviously I haven't done this yet, it's still early. I think it would require you to watch a lot of film and really figure out why. So that's one of the questions that I posed for Zachariah Branch is why, if he's so electric and so highly touted, was he not an even bigger part of the offense? He had good players in the past, play for USC, but he, like Jordan Addison there for a year. But I don't know why he wouldn't get a little bit more production. It ticked up this past season, right? 16 more catches. He had 500 yards. He had the touchdown. didn't return the ball as much in 2024 as he did in 2023. So just kind of giving you a little bit of synopsis of what Branch has done. But look, the return game is impressive. And this is from 2023. 24 returns for 442 yards and a touchdown. He's averaging over 20 on kickoff returns, over 20 yards, and he's shown the ability to take it to the house. If you've seen his 96-yard touchdown return, you say, whoa, that's a guy who can weave through people, that's a guy who can break tackles, and that's a guy who can accelerate past folks. He's taken a few punts. He's taken punts back too. He's only had one for a touchdown, but if you go and watch Zachariah Branch highlights, what you'll see is a few of them are just long punt returns where he's just weaving around people, making stuff happen, going back and forth. Not a ton of football players that can do that. So how does he fit on Georgia's offense? You could definitely see him in a Ladd McConkey type of role from a couple of years ago, and I think look, Dominic Lovett has kind of been the slot guy for Georgia in the wake of Ladd McConkey being hurt for a good bit of 2023, and that was Dominic Lovett's first year at Georgia, and then as well as in 2024, he was just kind of the main slot guy for Georgia. Well, I think that Zachariah Branch can fill in at that spot. I think that he poses a problem for defenses in terms of the explosion and the speed. And if Georgia can get that back from anyone on the offensive side of the ball, not just in the slot, it's going to be good. This also helps get another experienced and explosive weapon for a quarterback who is likely going to be Gunnar Stockton for Georgia, right? Until I get some information that tells me that it's not going to be Gunnar Stockton, I'm playing this game with the assumption that Gunnar is going to be the quarterback for Georgia in 2025. So far, there is nothing that's told me that that's not going to be the case. They haven't gone after a guy. I haven't heard rumors that Puglisi is better than him. Now, if you watch him in warm-ups and you watch him in practice, you might form your own opinions, and I think that Puglisi definitely has a lot of potential in the future in terms of his arm talent, but it's going to be Gunnar. And you've seen a little bit of Gunnar. Georgia fans and a lot of Georgia fans know about Gunnar just because of the high school. Gunnar he can really sling it around, and I think that you saw that in the Sugar Bowl, right? Throw all the high school stuff out of there. Throw out his receivers being open all the time on go routes. Let's talk about what we've seen on the collegiate level. Well, you saw against Texas in a really good defense that they didn't want to push the ball downfield and that they wanted to control it. Part of it is just a rushed game plan and just mixing into it. When you get your starting quarterback hurt in the first half and Gunnar goes out there for the second half, play calling was condensed. A lot of it was around the line of scrimmage with RPOs and read options and just quick screens. They opened it up more against Notre Dame. Now, it didn't work because they didn't win the game, but there's a lot of reasons why they didn't win the game. But you saw, hey, Gunnar can sling it. He can hit Arian Smith in stride, and he can hit Dylan Bell when Dylan Bell gets open way downfield, and he can hit open guys across the middle of the field. Gunnar will get better. He's good, man, and I'd have a hard time seeing him just get worse. I think that that's a player that will improve for Georgia, and this helps. And this gives him a guy that he can throw it to over the top, a guy that can take a screen to the house. Georgia was lacking that. That's what Ladd McConkey could do. He could take a trick play to the house. He could take a screen behind the line of scrimmage. You could hand it to him on a jet sweep. And the same went for Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers was a walking touchdown too in terms of just, I can get this guy the ball anywhere in the field and he is a threat to score. That's what you're getting with Zachariah Branch. Someone who is a threat to score when they have the ball in their hands, no matter where they are on the field and they're in that situation. It's something Georgia lacked on offense this past year. There are a number of issues for Georgia. And look, this is how you know Georgia's in a good position just in the scope of everything. We're complaining about an SEC championship season. We're complaining about a season in which they got to the Sugar Bowl, in which they were the final 8 teams, and we're talking about all these issues that they had and all these problems. It was an 11-win team. The expectations are really high. The standards are really high. So the thought is, hey, this blue chip recruit, this former 5-star, going to Georgia could definitely help an offense that's struggling. I think it's important that Gunnar Stockton has better weapons around him than Carson Beck did in 2024 if you want to win a national championship, because at the end of the day, that's why you're watching this video. It's not just because you love Georgia. It's because you also probably want them to win a national championship, or you're someone who's interested in what I have to say, who doesn't care about Georgia one way or the other, and I welcome y'all in here as well. The production's got to be better Arian Smith was Georgia's leading receiver this past season, 817 yards, 4 touchdowns, and that's what it was. And that's typically what you get out of leading receiver for Georgia, but what you're seeing is they're not running the ball as well, and this scheme is changing. And if that's the case, you need players like Branch, you need players like Bowers and McConkey, especially if Georgia's run game doesn't get fixed over this offseason. What if Georgia just can't run the ball as well again? And they don't have a guy that's even close to 1,000 yards, and they're not breaking 2,000 yards as a team. It will be important to have these playmakers on the outside. So what does it mean for Georgia? It should mean that the passing offense is a little bit better with Branch out there. I have questions about why it hasn't produced as much. Is he more of a gadget player than people realize? I'm not going to sit here and just praise the decision until we see it in a Georgia uniform, but I think this should be a good thing for Georgia. And when you add in his brother coming, I don't know as much about Zion Branch. I'm not going to sit here and waste your time. He's got 2 season-ending injuries, but he adds to a defensive back room that, look, you're going to lose out on Malachi Starks, Dan Jackson. You could lose out on Dalen Everett, who could enter the draft. So it shores up another position room that's getting bled out from the NFL this offseason. Thank you for watching.